Paula Callan, and I am the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia, known locally as QUT. I'll start with a disclosure statement. I am a member of the Australian Open Access Support Group, which advocates for open access and develops resources to support institutions with the delivery of open access. However, after working in academic libraries for over 20 years, I also have a great appreciation of the valuable role publishers play in the scholarly communication landscape. My personal position is that academia, libraries and publishers need to work together to build a successful scholarly communication system for the 21st century. I've been invited to give an overview of the situation in Australia and New Zealand in relation to policies which mandate open access provision for published research articles. In my presentation, I will be briefly describing the research environment in this region and the support for the principle of open access at various levels. I will then focus on the details of the existing policies, covering specific requirements or obligations for researchers and their institutions. Starting with Australia, we have a population of just over 23 million and 39 universities. Last year we produced around 53,000 peer-reviewed articles, which equates to around 3.6% of global output. The citation impact of these articles overall was 28% above world average. New Zealand has a population of just over 4.5 million and 8 universities. In 2013, they produced just over 13,000 peer-reviewed articles. 1.7% of them were in the top 1% in terms of citations. I think I can state with some confidence that all levels of government in Australia and New Zealand support the principle of open access. And they've led by example with open licensing of government information and data. 7 years ago, the Australian federal government provided funding to the tune of 25 million Australian dollars to the university sector to develop institutional repositories. There is an expectation that this infrastructure will be used to support a range of initiatives related to open access and their own research assessment exercise. There are now a large number of academics in Australia engaging with open access in one form or another. For example, there are 115 open access journals published in Australia. Mostly these are run by groups of academics or scholarly societies. We also have quite a few grassroots open access champions within the research community in Australia. Many are up-and-coming young researchers who understand the power of networks and are frustrated by what they see as lost opportunities. However, it's also true that many academics are still a little bewildered by some of the terminology around open access. And they can be a bit annoyed by suggestions that they should now be reading publishing agreements before signing them. I will now move on to the details of the open access mandates in Australia, starting with the funding body mandates. In Australia, we have two major research funding bodies: the National Health and Medical Research Council, which, as its name suggests, focuses on health-related research, and the Australian Research Council, which funds research in a diverse range of disciplines, including health and biomedicine. Their policies align with the government's stated reason for investing in research, that is, to support its role in improving the well-being of society. The preamble to their policies includes the following statement: to maximise the benefit from research, publications resulting from research activities must be disseminated as broadly as possible to allow access by other researchers and the wider community. The NHMRC policy applies to peer-reviewed journal publications published after the 1st of July 2012, regardless of the start date of the grant. Whereas the ARC policy applies to all ARC grants awarded after the 1st of January 2013 and applies to all types of publications, including books and book chapters. The actual obligations of both policies are identical. The grant, including the grant ID, must be acknowledged on the publication. The publication details, i.e. the metadata, must be submitted to an institutional repository as soon as possible after the paper is accepted. This must include the grant ID. The author's accepted manuscript version must be submitted to the repository as soon as possible after the publication date. However, it need not be openly accessible at this stage if an embargo is required. An open access version of the paper must be available within 12 months of the publication date or as soon as possible after that date. This can be the author's accepted manuscript version or the published version. If an open access copy will never be available, then this must be declared in the final report and a reason given. ARC grant applications include a requirement to submit a plan for communicating the research results to other researchers and the broader community. This is to encourage researchers to think about how they are going to comply with the open access requirement long before they get to the publishing stage. And certainly before they get to the stage where they have signed a publishing agreement which is non-compliant. No additional funding is being provided for open access publishing, but researchers can choose to use a portion of the grant to pay article processing charges. However, as Green Open Access is also compliant, they are free to choose to publish in subscription journals provided the publisher allows them to post an open access manuscript version within 12 months, in which case they do not have to use grant money to be compliant. As I mentioned a moment ago, acknowledging the grant on all related publications is one of the requirements. Ideally, the journal manuscript submission platform would prompt the authors to supply this information. If possible, the information also needs to be incorporated into the article metadata, which is supplied to indexing services such as Scopus and Web of Science. Most universities in Australia have now created a field for grant information in their repositories. The ARC and NHMRC have requested that the information be displayed as a PERL. This is a persistent identifier, rather like a DOI. The PERL will resolve to a web-based record for the research project, created by the Australian National Data Service. The records form part of Research Data Australia, a repository for research datasets and information about government-funded research. The objective is to enable grant information to be linked to related publications and datasets. The National Library of Australia harvests publication metadata from Australian institutional repositories. The grant information stored in the metadata allows publications related to ARC and NHMRC grants to be identified. Via their collection profiler, it is possible to generate a count of how many publications are tagged with the grant ID related to a particular funder. The profiling tool can drill down to data for a particular institution. Consequently, institutions will be keen to make sure all their grant-related publications are tagged with grant IDs. Australian universities have a big task ahead, trying to ensure that all their grant-funded researchers understand the requirements. Yes, it was in the conditions of grant document, but many researchers skim-read this in the same way they read publishing agreements. The Open Access Support Group has created some resources to help communicate the information. In terms of institutional open access mandates, 13 out of the 39 universities in Australia have an open access policy of some sort. Some are stronger than others, varying between encouraging open access and requiring it. Most are harmonising their policies with the ARC and NHMRC policies, allowing 12-month embargoes and accepting peer-reviewed author manuscript versions as compliant. Using the Web of Science database, I was able to determine that just over 10% of Australian papers published in 2013 were published in open access journals. It's difficult to get information about the proportion which involved an article processing fee, and if it did, who provided the funds. My own university, QUT, sets aside a portion of the library resource allocation each year to provide financial support for Gold Open Access publishing. To ensure the money only goes to genuine scholarly journals, strict criteria must be met. For example, the journal must be indexed by Web of Science. I should say that this is not a common practice in Australia. Very few other institutions are using library money to pay article processing fees. So what's happening in New Zealand, or across the ditch as we say in Australia? There is a lot of activity in open access journal publishing. The Directory of Open Access Journals lists 114 open access New Zealand journals. Nationally, there's a lot of support for open access to taxpayer-funded resources. However, at the moment, this is more evident in relation to government information and digitisation projects related to cultural heritage. Currently, while open access is strongly encouraged, there are no funder mandates which apply to research publications. 2 universities and 1 polytechnic have institutional policies. I believe there may be another in the wings, but this is still a work in progress. In 2013, just over 7% of the New Zealand articles in Web of Science were published in an open access journal. Consultation with New Zealand colleagues revealed that the funding for article processing charges comes from a variety of sources, such as grants, faculties, researchers' own pockets. A major New Zealand university estimated that their annual spend on article processing charges was between $100,000 and $200,000 New Zealand dollars. To wrap up, I have some concluding remarks. In Australia and New Zealand, there is support at both the top level and grassroots level for open access. Some of the levels in between are still struggling with how the concept fits into existing academic reward structures and discipline cultures. Before submitting a manuscript, an increasing number of authors will be checking that the journal will allow them to comply with a mandate which requires an open access copy within 12 months. Journal publishers can assist by making this information readily available on the journal website. With the current focus on rankings, universities expect their libraries to help increase the quality and impact of its research. Librarians understand that this requires both the additional dissemination opportunities afforded by open access and the valuable services offered by journal publishers. Libraries are not cancelling subscriptions based on the availability of open access manuscript versions. The continued success of publishers like Sage Publications, which allows unembargoed green open access for over 700 of its journals, shows that green open access can coexist quite happily with subscription publishing. Thank you for listening.